Have you ever noticed that, generally speaking, men just seem to finish their meals faster than women? You've probably seen it at the dinner table. It's a really common observation, but is there any actual science behind it? Well, today we're going to break down the fascinating research on why this happens. So what's really going on? So this is the big question we're digging into. And look, a ton of research confirms this isn't just some old stereotype. It's a real, measurable phenomenon. But the why, that's where things get super interesting. To figure it out, we're going to start with the simple mechanics of eating, then dive into physiology and energy needs, and finally, we'll get into the deeper role of hormones in even our evolutionary past. All right, first up, let's look at the most straightforward piece of the puzzle, the physical act of eating itself. You can actually break down how we eat into these tiny specific actions, and it turns out studies show clear differences right from childhood. So what does eating faster even mean, really? It's not just one thing. In study after study, we see that males, on average, just take bigger bites. Then they chew each of those bites fewer times, which means the food is literally in their mouth for a shorter period. These little mechanical differences all add up, and the end result is a much quicker meal. Okay, so why do those mechanical differences even exist? Well, a huge part of the answer is just basic anatomy. On average, males have a larger oral cavity. Literally, there's just more space in there. They also tend to have more muscle mass, which translates to a stronger bite force, and even a higher rate of salivary flow to help process the food. You put all that together, and you've basically built a more efficient system for processing food quickly. But that's just the hardware. To really get the why, we need to look at the body's fuel requirements. Okay, so we've seen the how of eating faster, but why would one body be built for speed over another? The answer starts to come into focus when we look at the body's engine and how much fuel it needs to run. You can actually see the whole chain of events right here. It starts with this. On average, males have more fat-free mass, which is mostly muscle, and muscle is metabolically active. It burns more calories, even when you're just sitting around. That leads to a higher basal metabolic rate, or BMR. A higher BMR just means you have greater energy needs every single day. And that higher demand for fuel, well, it could create a really strong physiological drive to get that energy into your body as fast as possible. Now we're going to go even deeper, moving from the body's structure to its internal communication system. I'm talking about hormones and brain signals. They are constantly regulating our appetite and how we respond to food. And this is where some of the most profound differences start to show up. This is where it gets really fascinating. The research suggests that women's bodies are often more sensitive to the internal signals about satiety. You know, that feeling of being full. For instance, after exercising, women often experience a stronger hormonal urge to eat than men do. Then you add in the hormonal fluctuations from the menstrual cycle, and what you have is a system that is constantly and very precisely fine-tuning its response to the body's energy levels. And this quote from a really important study, it just nails the heart of a major scientific theory. It's suggesting that this more sensitive, more tightly regulated system in women isn't random at all. It might be tied to something absolutely fundamental, the huge energy demands of reproduction. So let's zoom out for a second and connect these dots. If female biology is more finely tuned to energy balance for reproductive reasons, what does that mean in a bigger evolutionary context? Well, this leads us to a pretty compelling hypothesis. But hold on, before we go any further, it's super important we're all on the same page about what an evolutionary hypothesis is. This is not a proven fact. It's a scientific explanation based on all the available evidence that suggests how a certain trait might have been a real advantage for our ancestors' survival and their ability to have kids. Okay, so here's the big idea. The slower, more regulated eating patterns and the more sensitive hormonal responses we see in women might actually be an evolutionary adaptation. Because female reproductive success is so critically dependent on having enough energy stores, the theory goes that the female body evolved all these different mechanisms to prevent energy deficits, basically to protect fertility at all costs. But here's the thing, it's never, ever just biology, right? This model shows us the bigger picture. Our biological predispositions are always interacting with our psychology, things like body image, and powerful social factors like what we're taught about how men and women should eat. All these things overlap and influence each other to shape how every single one of us behaves. So let's do a quick recap of what we know versus what we're still figuring out. The science is really solid on the physical and mechanical differences and on the distinct energy needs and hormonal responses. What's still an active area of research is trying to untangle the exact influence of social and cultural norms from our underlying biology, and of course, definitively confirming those evolutionary drivers.
So, the most important takeaway is this. The difference in eating speed between men and women isn't about just one thing. It's this incredibly complex interplay of our physical hardware, our internal hormonal software, and maybe even our deep evolutionary history. It really leaves you with a final thought. As our social worlds and our food environments keep changing so fast, how might these ancient biological patterns continue to shift in the future?